I'm Julie Naklia, and I just wanted to make a video on why I liked my husband so much. And if you're the sort of person who thinks it's bad to make videos about yourself or talk about yourself, then please keep hate watching. But for me, that's what I enjoy reading is autobiographies. I like to hear about people's actual life experiences. I find it the most interesting, so that's why I'm sharing mine. Anyway, the reason why I like him so much is because when I met him, I was basically insane, and he pulled me out of that, and I don't think anybody else hardly could have. I wasn't like delusional or anything. I was or psychotic. I basically had a dissociative identity disorder. Like my mind and was fragmented into like 50 different pieces that weren't connected to each other, and as a result I always felt like I wasn't real, like I wasn't there, like I wasn't alive. But that doesn't really capture what the experience is like. It's more like you feel like, imagine that you know you're asleep but you can't wake up, and you're like, you want to wake up but you can't. It's like, it's sort of a feeling like that, a feeling of like almost like being buried alive, like you're trapped in something and you can't get out. Have you seen that thing in Star Wars where like Han Solo, he's like frozen in something? I felt very much like that. Like I was captured and I wasn't able to be real and be alive, and I didn't know, I didn't think there was anything I could do about it. But James basically encouraged me to well, what happened is I ended up spending like a few years in a closet, basically. And during that time, well, I would do weird stuff that I don't really want to mention because it's just too weird and too personal to me. I don't think it would be useful to anyone else. But anyway, as a result, this weird stuff would bubble up, and then I would write it down and draw it. And after that, I would experience like physical sensations that would last for maybe like a day or so. Like sometimes it'd be intense pain, other times it'd be like nausea. It could be like extreme hunger or extreme cold, different things. And once those sensations had passed through me, to my surprise, I would discover that somehow I had gotten a little piece of myself back, like one little grain of rice, you know? Like I could just feel that I was a touch more real. But over the course of years, those tiny grains of rice really added up until I was significantly more real than I was before. And I felt I could function as a normal person. And I mean, lowest level of a normal person, but still, that was something. And during that time, I also learned a bunch of things that James was critical in helping me to learn. Like, I learned not to be afraid of thinking, you know, because people always say, especially females, oh, don't think, you know, you're never supposed to think. But for me, learning to think was one of the biggest keys in not being insane anymore. It's like James gave me the idea that you can't think too much. Like, it's never wrong to think. It's never wrong to think about anything. If you want to think about why somebody said something for like 17 hours or 17 days, that's not a waste of time. And I found that for me that was very accurate. It's like the more I thought, the more I started to entangle some of the things that had never made sense. And then that was critical to me getting pieces of myself back and becoming more real. Another big thing he taught me is not to be afraid of bad stuff. Like, don't be afraid of seeing bad stuff. Don't be afraid of seeing the bad in others, because before that I was like hyper spiritualized, I guess you could say. Like, I was really afraid to look at the bad stuff or to see bad in others because I felt guilty, like it would be my fault if I saw it. Like, I would be like creating it or something if I saw it. And I was just too scared, you know. I didn't want to see anything bad. So I just blocked that stuff out. But looking at bad stuff and being willing to look at stuff that was dark and scary, for me, was the key to getting better. It's like, my whole life I'd always thought you were supposed to think positive and stuff, but it was when I started like dwelling on the negative that I started to recover and get pieces of myself back, because I could finally make sense of things. And also I was willing to access the stuff connected with pieces of myself I was disassociated from, because you don't dissociate from stuff due to like happy stuff, it's for other reasons. And if you block out all negative stuff and you see it as bad, then you're not going to be able to reconnect with those pieces of yourself that are trapped. And so really being able to look into the dark side, and also being willing to think about things like a detective, kind of. That was what he taught me. And he also taught me that it wasn't a waste of time to spend as long as I needed to look at this stuff. And that was critical for me, because for years I'd just been running around like a chicken with no head, because I couldn't really function, but I just kept trying to function, so I was kind of stuck in a loop. And it was really only when I stepped out of the loop and like looked inside of myself that things turned around. And he's the one who facilitated that, since on my own I would have felt too guilty, and I would have felt like it was too silly, and I wouldn't have believed in my own ideas, because I had very specific ideas of what I should do, but to me the ideas seemed completely ridiculous. But he's the one who would encourage me to try them, and then it would end up that my ideas would actually work. So that was kind of the first phase, when I looked at bad stuff. I looked at stuff in the past, and I got pieces of myself back. But then there was like another phase years later when, so I'd worked out a lot of stuff, but I saw the problem, like it was constantly getting bombarded in my head, and I didn't know why, and I just couldn't, it was horrible. And he encouraged me once again to look at that. He's like, look at it. And I didn't want to, but I did. And what I learned over the course of time is that the stuff bombarding my head was just information about my environment and my world and the people around me. I was just picking up stuff about them. And when I took the time to really carefully look at it, which was very annoyingly tedious, just like the other process had been, it was a lot of work. But when I took the time to look at it, I could interpret. I learned how to interpret the information, and then I realized that I was just perceiving things, like other people's thoughts, other people's feelings. When another person like reached out to me to communicate, I would feel that. If another person was angry at me, I'd feel that. I would feel the things that James was doing. And so every morning I would wake up, and for like an hour I would write in my ESP journal. I could really do it for an hour, because it's like it's hard work in a sense. It's like you have to really like concentrate in a way that's not completely enjoyable, I guess. Sort of like doing math problems or something, but except that in this case it's almost the reverse. You have to concentrate by loosening your mind rather than tightening it. But anyway, so I would do that every morning, like draw all the colored blobs and what color they were and who they were coming from. And then I learned how to interpret them, and then I would like fact check my findings to see if they were accurate, and to my surprise they were very accurate. And that made me realize that this stuff I was perceiving was not delusional. I was just picking up information about my world in a different way. And once I realized that, then it caused the disturbances to not disturb me, because I was no longer internalizing it. I could see it as, like we see a bunch of stuff bombarding our eyes all the time, but we know what it is, so it's like it doesn't freak us out, and like once I started to understand what that stuff was and be able to interpret it, then it was no longer experienced as a disturbance in the same way. It was more like, oh, someone's mad at me, or whatever, like a red ball. If it's on this side, that means it's a man. If it's on this side, it means it's a woman, but there are a few exceptions to that. So I mean, that was like a huge turning point too. It's like I was really like Helen Keller in a sense. I was like caught in my own world, and he was like Andy Sullivan, where he helped me to realize that I could perceive information about the world that surrounded me, you know, and that what was happening in me was connecting to the world around me. I wasn't like just some crazy person. I was just perceiving information about the world that was completely sensible, and it was actually it wasn't, you know, cosmic messages from unicorns. It was just things like, you know, like maybe what someone's jerking off to or something. It could be stuff like that sometimes. But it was just like very practical types of stuff, or if like someone was gonna like cancel a plan or something, you know, like, or what, just like the mundane information would be coming in through my head. So he really made me understand that I wasn't crazy, or even weird per se. I was just picking up lots of information. Because I used to be like, when I would be around people, I would become very erratic. Like I would start saying stuff, and I mean, I still did this a little bit, but I mean, it was very extreme. I would just start saying stuff or expressing emotions, and I would have no idea why I was saying what I was saying or expressing the emotions. Other people would get mad. I would be upset by the whole dynamic, and you know, and I started to realize I was just like picking up other people's thoughts and emotions and kind of running with them. But once I realized that it was other people's thoughts and emotions, then it didn't bother me anymore, and I didn't have to act them out. I could really separate myself from them. So that was like a huge turning point. But it's like he connected me with my own mind and how my own mind worked, so that my mind could work for me rather than me thinking that I had a problem. But I stopped doing the ESP journal after a few years because, well, one, because I started interacting with more people on Facebook, so the amount of people and information and stuff just became too complicated to track. But the second reason is because I think me doing that, in some ways, I think it had a bad impact on James, because it got to the point as I kept doing it where he functionally had zero privacy. You know, because all of his thoughts and feelings and whatever would show up in my ESP journal, you know, and I would like share it with him, and he's a very private person, and I think that, you know, he was the one who encouraged me to do it for starters, but I think maybe it was kind of like a Frankenstein thing. He kind of created a monster that maybe he didn't really like the outcome. I mean, sometimes he would like it and he would ask me questions about people and stuff, but then other times I think he wanted to not be visible. So, which is very understandable. I mean, probably most people wouldn't like it if someone was constantly like reading our minds and drawing pictures of it. Because I mean, sometimes it would be really specific pictures of things, and you know, like if he went someplace, I would know where he went. All sorts of stuff. So, yeah, so I stopped doing it partially because I felt like it was causing too much conflict between the two of us. For that reason. But nonetheless, the fact remains that through helping me to trust my perceptions, he really changed my life, and I don't know how many people could have done that for me, you know, because normally people, if anything's abnormal, people just kind of brush it off, you know, they don't try to make sense of it really. And that was a different quality he had, that it didn't really matter if something was normal and ordinary or unordinary, he would try to make sense of it in the exact same way, and he encouraged me to do so as well, which for me was the key to unlocking my own mind and being able to function. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. That is why I like him so much. Thank you. Bye.